flying two-footed kick. And I realized what has been jabbing me all day is that when I lost my finger in that glove, it tore my fingernail off, and it was still inside the glove. That say, don't try this at home. The wooden guys with the rifles, finger throbbing. We don't let them, these seasons of darkness, define us or hold us back. And they pulled me out of Nutcracker. And I had to stand with the rest of the chumps singing. We support each other, we love each other, and we help each other get through them. I'm in the family business. And I said, I lost my finger yesterday. To see death and destruction and evil at its worst on display. And so put a bumper on it. And it tore the tip of my middle finger off. I mean, like halfway down the digit. Welcome back to the show. I'm MCNEW, and this is Duty, Grit, and Grinds. In a previous episode, I talked about cutting my cast off so I could get back to work early. I was working a desk, I was pushing paper, I was on light duty, and I was hating life. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was letting my team down, that I was missing out, and that I needed to be out on the street getting after it. I'd like to take an episode to talk about where that mindset came from, give some perspective, give credit where credit is due. You see, when I was growing up, I heard a couple of phrases repeated back to me time and again. Walk it off and put it to bed. And it didn't matter who in the chain of command you might be complaining to. Aunts, uncles, grandma, grandpa, dad. If you came with a complaint, you were likely to hear one of those two things. Walk it off and put it to bed. And this wasn't a lack of understanding or a lack of sympathy or an uncaring attitude. This was the idea that not everything requires a Band-Aid or an ice pack. And not everything is worthy of missing work or missing school or letting your team down. Sometimes you just needed a good night's rest and you'll feel better in the morning. Sometimes you just need a walk around the block or a walk to the end of the driveway and you'll feel better when you get back. And this was more than a lesson about scraped knees and bruised egos. This was the seeds planted for a mindset and a way of life. The understanding that pain and setbacks are a part of the process. And sometimes you're going to fall down and you need to get back up. And sometimes it's going to hurt a little when you get back up. Now, contrast this with another way of thinking. And I'm not going to say kids today, because I don't think that's fair to kids today. Because the truth is, every generation has had weak people. People who believe that every scrape, every bump, every bruise, every setback is a reason to declare defeat, a reason to quit. Somewhere along the lines, people have confused discomfort with danger and setbacks for failure. Today, I'm going to dive into stories from my life and times where this lesson has been on display. And they're fun stories. But I'm going to tell stories about myself and about my kids and how we've come to understand that growth happens when you push through setbacks and tough times and you grind it out despite the pain. So when I was in second grade, I had a bus stop that came to my house about a block away from my house. And in these days, my buddies and me were really into WWF when it was WWF. And we were really into Portland wrestling, if you remember that. And one of the things we liked to do was legitimize the disclaimers that you now see that say, don't try this at home. And I say that because we would reenact the different moves, the different fighting that the characters would display on the TV. And so I'm at the bus stop one day after school, and my buddy from across the street and I are walking back, and we start fighting, play fighting, like wrestling. And I decide that I'm going to do this flying two-footed kick, like completely parallel to the ground, both feet out, arms at my side, flying through the air, which probably works just fine on a wrestling rink or mats, but not so much on the sidewalk, as my kick did land on this buddy of mine that was a couple of grades older than me. And I fell straight to the ground on my left elbow. And it hurt like all get out. And so I'm probably crying, although I don't have a great memory of that. But let's be honest, I was in second grade and I had just broken my elbow, cracking it on the sidewalk, doing this flying kick thing. And so I make my way back to my house and I'm pretty upset, probably. And at some point my dad gets home and he was driving truck at the time. And so probably wasn't home when I first got home. So dad gets home and I've been nursing this elbow and I say, hey, my elbow hurts. And this is, me today, how I think it probably went, but you'll get the gist of it. Hey, something's wrong with my elbow. I did this flying kick thing and I landed on the sidewalk and it hurts really bad. And dad says, okay, put it to bed. So I'm like, I don't know. And again, this is my memory of how it probably went. Hurts pretty bad. And I'm probably, I probably got tears in my eyes. And he probably lovingly said, put it to bed. And so I put it to bed. And I wake up the next morning and I say, hey, that didn't help. It still hurts. And so he took me to the hospital or urgent care or the doctor. And we get an x-ray and it's broken. I've fractured my elbow. And I know what you're thinking. I just got done with a whole monologue about how you shouldn't go to the doctor and how you should tough through the pain. But that actually wasn't the point. I'm not a psycho, and neither was my family. The point was just that not everything requires a trip to the doctor or an ice pack or a Band-Aid. But sometimes you break bones and you have injuries and illness, and you should go to the doctor. So this is my disclaimer. If you need to go to the doctor, go to the doctor. But sometimes you can just tough it out. Oftentimes. And so I get this cast, and it's right around Christmas time. And I remember that because the family took the one and only trip for Christmas that I ever remember my family taking in my childhood during Christmas to a mountain resort where there was snow on the ground and there was a hot tub, and it was the whole extended family came. And here I am in a cast, unable to enjoy any of the things. That's how I remember that I broke my arm right before Christmas. And actually, I just had this memory. Another reason I remember it was during Christmas is the school had a concert every Christmas. They probably still call them Christmas concerts back then. And there were tryouts for nutcrackers. The wooden guys with the rifles. And I tried out, before I broke my arm, I tried out for nutcracker. And during the Christmas concert, the people chosen to be nutcracker based on their skill, their ability to walk straight-legged and straight-armed and march back and forth while everyone sang whatever they were singing. Based on your ability to do that, they selected a number of kids to be nutcrackers. And I was delighted to be selected to be a nutcracker. And then I went and broke my arm. And I was unable to perform. And they pulled me out of nutcracker. And I had to stand with the rest of the chumps singing while everybody else selected got to march like nutcrackers. That was quite a rabbit trail. But anyways, so I break my arm. Dad takes me to the doctor. And eventually I get the cast off and life goes on. Coincidentally, I had pretty bad handwriting back when I was a kid. And having a cast, I'm left-handed, I've mentioned that before, having a cast on forced me, and I was still able to use my fingertips. And so it braced my arm and it forced me to slow my handwriting down. And I actually came out of a cast with quite a bit better handwriting. It's seriously deteriorated since. So flash forward, I'm now a teenager. And just to give a little bit of background, when I was 14 or 15 years old, my grandpa owned a logging company. My dad drove truck for him. My uncle drove truck for him. It was a small operation. And in our region, just to be clear, we're talking Doug firs in the Pacific Northwest. So legit logging. We did small operations, small time jobs. because that was the capability we had, and there was a big need for it. And so Grandpa's business, as a child, as a teenager, seems like it was a successful business. It paid the bills and employed several people, and we were able to do quite a bit of work. And so at 14 or 15 years old, the summer after school, I'm offered an opportunity to work for the family business. And now you have to understand that as a child in this family, this is the dream. Everything I drew or doodled or played games on the floor, everything was trucks and logging and chainsaws. And this was the dream. And so it was quite an opportunity to be offered this job as a young teenager working in the woods. Now, the first job I had was running a small cat, which is like a bulldozer, if you're not sure what that is, with a spool of cable on the back, where I would drive out in the woods where the people who cut the trees had them down on the ground, limbed and chopped into sections, 40 or so feet long, let's say. And I would drag them in 3 logs at a time while there's active logging all around at 14 or 15 years old. Looking back, this is an awesome opportunity and a very dangerous field. And what an opportunity. But when I tell that to people now, they think it sounds a little crazy, but what an opportunity. So I'm 14 or 15 years old. I don't actually recall exactly. And I'm running a cat for a small logging operation, dragging logs to where the log trucks would load them. And like I said, my dad and uncle drove the truck. I'm in the family business, and I'm delighted. And I would do this for several summers where I would progress into larger machines at 15, 16 years old, running heavy machinery, setting my own chokers, dragging logs out of the woods. And I won't claim to have been a logger because that doesn't seem fair to real loggers. But as a kid, I was living the life. And I made few $100 a week that I was not allowed to spend and I was forced to save. And the ultimate goal of all of this was to buy my first vehicle, which was a 1984 Chevy S10. And I was able to pay cash for it almost. Separate story, but they were asking $2,150 and I had $2,100. Separate story. So I had to borrow $50 from my dad. So as long as I'm telling separate stories, and this episode is supposed to be about working through adversity, but I got my first paycheck, and it's $244. I remember exactly. It was $244, and it was a handwritten paycheck that I was given at the landing in the muck as Grandpa's handwriting checks and giving them out to the 3 or 4 guys that were working this job. And I noticed that mine has some deductions, so it's not for the full $244. And I say, hey, however I said this, somehow I say, hey, mine seems a little short. And Dad's there and Grandpa's there, and Dad points out, yeah, you think those boots and those pants and that hickory shirt were free? Or the suspenders you're wearing? So my first check of $244 was a hard lesson in the deductions to have the equipment necessary to do the job. And so it was like pennies. But I was well equipped, and the clothes on my back were no gift. I paid for them myself out of my first check. Another rabbit hole. Anyways, so I'm running these machines, and I'm working in the woods, and I'm loving life. Well, being a glutton for punishment, I had an opportunity at 16, 17 years old to also help out on the weekends. So that was a Monday through Friday. And on the weekends, a buddy offers me an opportunity to come with him to the hay fields to pull hay bales and unload them at the barn. It was just a job. It's still a job to this day for teenagers to pull hay out of the fields and help farmers get it to the barns. And so this is what I was doing on the weekends. Monday through Friday, I was working in the woods. And on the weekends, when available, I was hauling hay bales out of the fields. So on this particular day, I'm helping a farmer, and we've got the first load of hay out of the field, and we're at the barn, and the conveyor belt isn't running. So the conveyor was something that at the truck was a chain. It was about 2 inches wide or so. I don't have a lot of experience with this, so forgive me. And the conveyor would haul the hay to the loft, rather than having to like huck it up there, which some farms we had to do that. So you would take it off the truck, put it on the conveyor, and the chain would drag it to the loft where someone would pull it off the chain and stack it in the loft. So I was working at the bottom of the conveyor, and it wasn't working. So the farmer is, who knows where, trying to figure out why his conveyor is not working. And we are just being teenagers, just playing, just goofing off, horseplay, just talking to each other, waiting for this conveyor to start up. And I'm leaning at some point on the conveyor. I don't realize that this is happening. I'm just not paying attention. I'm a teenager, for gosh sakes, around dangerous equipment. And so I'm leaning on this conveyor when the farmer somewhere else must have flipped the breaker or figured out why it wasn't working, and it suddenly powers on. And I happen to be leaning in the most unfortunate position as my middle finger on this hand is in the chain as it starts up and pulls my hand through the cog that pulled the chain, and it tore the tip of my middle finger off. I mean, like halfway down the digit. It's just mashed, and I'm in a glove, but it pulls the glove off, pulls my fingertip off, and it's hanging by a thread. So I have this very serious injury where the tip of my finger's been pulled off. The farmer comes back, everybody's screaming because there's blood everywhere. And he turns off the conveyor and hauls me to the hospital where my dad meets me. The doctor says I have this memory of him saying it's one of the worst smash, pull. I don't remember the name of the injury, but it was one of the worst of that type he had ever seen. And he's able to, because it didn't get completely pulled off, smash it back down and stitch it back up. And I still have it to this day, but it's a little bit numb on the tip. And it was quite an ordeal. So that happened on, say, Saturday morning. So I obviously can't go back to the hayfield because I spent the day at the hospital. Sunday, I'm sitting at home nursing my wound. Sunday night comes, and it's getting late. And you have to understand that in the summer, logging operations are bound by strict hours of operation for fire danger. And so we were getting up at like 3:30 in the morning to be started at daylight because we had to be done by 2-3 o'clock for shutdowns. And so my dad comes by and sees me at a late hour where I would normally be in bed early because I have to work in the morning. And he comes by and he says, "Shouldn't you be in bed?" And I said, "I lost my finger yesterday. Like, how am I going to work?" And he says, "Put a bumper on it." And if you're wondering, put a bumper on it meant follow me into the bathroom where he takes a finger splint, the silver and blue ones that you would put on a broken finger. He bends it into a U shape, slides it gently over my finger, 2 strands of tape, and I have a bumper on the finger that I had partially lost. And he says, "You best get to bed. The crew bus will be here early." And so I went to bed with my bumper on my finger throbbing. The next morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever, I'm sitting out on the sidewalk waiting for the crew bus to arrive. I climb in and I get hauled out to the woods, finger throbbing. I got my glove, which is the glove I was wearing because I got to buy these things myself. I've got the glove I was wearing when I lost it, which means it's covered in blood. And I've got it in my back pocket, White Ox logging gloves. Get to my equipment, fire it up, and I start making runs out into the woods. And I don't have a specific memory of this. I just remember that it sucked. And so one nice thing about starting at 4:45, 5 in the morning is that lunch comes about halfway. So 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, it's lunchtime. And I make, a sandwich and a bag of chips in a lunchbox every day for myself. And so I come into the landing, the lunch whistle goes off, and so if I turn my machine off, and I'm leaning up against the tire of this machine, because this particular time I was running a skidder. If you know what that is, look it up. So I'm leaning against the skidder tire, and I'm pulling my gloves off and I'm getting my lunchbox out, and something had been bothering me all day, but I was working and I didn't take the time to figure out what it was. And so I'm pulling my glove off and something had been jabbing me all day inside my glove. And so now as I'm eating my sandwich with one hand, I turn this glove inside out. And I realize what has been jabbing me all day is that when I lost my finger in that glove, it tore my fingernail off. And it was still inside the glove. And so what had been jabbing me all day was the amputated fingernail of my middle finger in that finger of that glove. And so, I probably put it in my pocket because I'm 16 or 17 years old, and that's kind of cool. I turn my glove right side out, and I finish my lunch, and I go back out and finish my day with my bumper. I didn't love that. You can probably tell from the story. So, flash forward, I have kids of my own. And one of my kids is roller skating with a friend of hers, and the friend's dad was a friend of mine. And so we get a call that she had fallen. My daughter had fallen at the roller skating rink, and that she was injured. And so they come back and we go to the doctor and we go to an urgent care clinic. And this is not a shot at the urgent care clinic, but they do an x-ray and they take a look at it. And she's a trooper, but she's in a lot of pain. And the person who helped us, whether it was a doctor or a PA or a medical assistant or whatever, comes back in and says, well, it's not broken. And that's great news. So what you should do is encourage her to use it as much as possible. And this will get better with time. I'm like, okay, cool, doc. Thanks. So we go walking out to the car, and she's nursing her arm. We get out to the car or the truck or whatever we're driving, and someone in the family goes to open the door for him. And I say, nope. Doc says we need to encourage her to use it. So I say, go ahead, kid. Grab the door. So she, like with a little tear in her eye, pulls open the door, gets in like a trooper. We go home and some of the friends want to play outside. And I say, hey kid, if buddies are outside, why don't you go on out and play? And she's not really into it, but I said, hey, the doc says the best thing you can do for that is use it. So she goes out and she's playing. And sometime later, I get a phone call from the doctor's office. And I'm like, hey, hello. Says, hey, and this is my actual doctor, who I've mentioned in a previous podcast. He's a buddy of mine. Hey, I had a chance to look at your kid's chart, and I disagree. I've sent that in to the radiologist for a second opinion or some medical, mumbo jumbo. Long story short, your kid has a broken arm. You need to get back in here. We need to put a cast on that. Okay, let me go get her. She's out playing. She's probably on a bicycle or something. And so I go running outside and we take her back to the doctor's office. And of course she gets a cast, which she's in for some time. And so, like I said, I'm not a psycho. I'm just doing my best to teach lessons here. But when you got a broken arm, you need a cast. And so, yeah. I don't know if she remembers that. She'll watch this and she'll let me know if she remembers the time. The doc said, you need to use that. So we made her open the car door herself and go outside and play. Flash forward years later, another kid of mine is playing on the monkey bars or some, medieval contraption at the playground at the school she went to, and she falls and she has an unmistakable break of her humerus. And this was not something we messed around with. Like, she got urgently transported to a hospital out of our area, to a children's hospital. She has like major surgery. She gets a cast. So sometimes you need a cast. And actually that was a pretty upsetting deal just because it was such a bad break. And so that was kind of interesting. So like I said, sometimes your kids need a cast, but sometimes they get bumps and scrapes and they just need to be told to put it to bed. And so, over the years, kids will come upstairs or they will come out of their bedrooms before school and say, I just don't feel like going to school. And And I know what you're thinking. Like we have a responsibility not to spread illnesses at school, but like these kids are bringing home junk every day. If you have kids in school, you know what I mean. And so if they are able to get up and come out and tell me I don't feel well, 9 times out of 10 they're well enough to go to school. And so we might disagree on that. So over the years, I've had lots of opportunities to go to the emergency department for myself, for stitches, for the kids, for casts and stitches and concussions, and you name it. We play hard, and it's the way we are. And so in each of those cases, we have an opportunity to not allow it to be something that holds us back. It's an opportunity to dust ourselves off. We're responsible to, make sure we get healthy, but also not baby things. And so on top of those injuries and illnesses that we've battled through, we've also gone through emotional seasons. So like any family, individuals, and as a family, there's been dark times and we've dealt with stuff. And some stuff's been heavier than others. And in each of those cases over the years, we support each other, we love each other, and we help each other get through them. We don't let these seasons of darkness define us or hold us back or be a reason for failure. We lean on each other, we ask for help, and we get her done. And so this episode isn't intended to be dark or to go into any of those stories, although someday we will to some degree or another. But I do want to touch on one thing really quickly before I get into the last story of, something fun. And that is, as an industry, law enforcement has not always done a great job taking care of each other or acknowledging that it's okay that stuff bothers you sometimes. And so when I first started, it was very much the generation of police officers where you just toughed it out. You didn't talk about your troubles. And I actually don't think that it's weakness to say, dang, that thing really sucked or that situation really bothered me, because it's going to, right? You're going to go through all kinds of dark things. You're going to see death and destruction and evil at its worst on display. And so as an industry where we are right now in 2024, we are way better about taking care of each other, about letting each other know that it's cool if that bothered you. So we do our best not to let it be a reason that holds us back or that sets us back or creates a failure. But some folks need more help from than others and are more susceptible, to those setbacks. But as an industry, I think we're doing a lot better job taking care of each other. I'm pretty proud of that. So more on that later. But so a couple years back, we decide that our family is big enough, that we have enough children. And so in that decision, the duty fell to me to have a little procedure. The sort of procedure where the doc makes sure that the factory equipment still runs, but all the employees are laid off, if you catch my drift. And so it's described to me as a quick procedure, an inpatient, in and out, one morning procedure, no big deal. Lots of folks I know had done it before and had experiences that were fine. And so also some folks who had different experiences, less pleasant experiences. But one way or the other, it's a pretty routine deal. And so I go to a pre-op appointment with my wife, and they talk about what it's going to look like. We're going to come in the morning. It's a couple of minutes, really quick, and you go home, you put some ice on it, and a couple of days you're back, whatever. It's in and out, wham, bam, snip, snip. So at the pre-op appointment, they they prescribe something to relax you, a Valium or something similar. Generally, I don't do medication. I have an aversion to it. I don't. So far, luckily, even in some of the surgeries I've had, I have been able to manage pain with just Tylenol and rest. And so I don't love the idea of this relaxant. So they prescribe it, and I decided pretty much in the moment, it's optional. I don't need it. And so morning comes of the appointment. Wife and I go in, and they bring you back, and the nurse is getting you all ready, and she says, "Did you take the Valium?" And I said, "Nope. Didn't feel like I needed it. I don't feel anxious." And she is actually not thrilled about this, and neither was the doc, but here we go. So I lay down, and they do their thing. And I don't know what other people's experiences have been, but it was super unpleasant. It was, I'll compare it to torture, although no disrespect to people who've been actually tortured. It was not fun. And so, but it was short, and it was over, and they send you home with some ice that you sit on, and you go home. And my plan was to just get some sleep. So I had the whole weekend to get better, and I was back to work on Monday. So this is a Friday. So I'm a captain at the time, and as a captain, I'm serving in a role as a commander for the crisis negotiation team, which is attached to the SWAT team. And so that becomes important because as I'm resting in my bed, either awake or asleep, I don't recall, a couple Tylenols on board, laying on an ice pack, a SWAT page comes out. Phone goes off, making all kinds of racket, and I grab it, and here's what I learned through that and through phone calls or through, looking up the information on my phone. There has been what is deemed a credible threat of an armed individual at the high school that our team covers, one of the high schools that in the jurisdictions that our team covers, and it's deemed credible. And while there are lots of hoax threats and they are taken with a degree of seriousness, there was reason to believe that this was a legit threat of violence that was looming with this armed individual in the school right now. And so everybody's flying to this location, and our team's paged out to do SWAT stuff. And so this is the school where at the time at least 3 of my kids went, and I'm laying in bed. First of all, work is calling. This would have been one of those times where I probably just let the rest of them handle it. But my kids are there. And so I pull on my clothes. I pull on my, to do commander stuff, you just in, pants and a shirt. So I pull on regular clothes, basically, sling my vest. I shove some gauze down where the ice pack had been. And I come out of the bedroom. My wife, pretty surprised, but understanding, like, I'm not sitting this one out. And so I go over to the school. There's just cops everywhere. We have a command post set up, and we are running around doing stuff. At the command post, we're just standing there, but we're working, we're walking around, we're handling this call. Team guys are doing their thing. Patrol guys are all around the perimeter. Kids are being sheltered in place. Some are being evacuated. People are moving. It's if you can imagine a school with a couple thousand people or whatever, and this potential threat, it was a big scene. It was a big deal. All the while, I'm like 3 hours out of this minor procedure, and I'm feeling it. It's excruciating, honestly. And so I'm working through it, and I'm texting with the kids. I got to see a couple of them, and now listen, all the kids at the school were really, really upset. They were really afraid. This was, like I said, this was different than some of the hoaxes that you'll see at a school. Every indication was that this was a legit threat. And so all the kids just had kind of panic and terror on their face. And I see a couple of my kids, and 2 or 3 of them, or whatever, maybe all of them, I don't remember. What I remember is they were happy to see me. Like tear-filled eyes, happy. And so it was worth it. Now, at some point, it's done, it's over, threat is resolved, and we break down the command post, and I skip the debrief, and I go home, and I had some bandages to change. Some stitches had failed, and there was some damage, but I was no worse for wear. And I sat back down on my ice pack and took a nap. So there you go. Oftentimes the real battle is in your mind. It's about accepting that hard things are a part of life and choosing to do them anyway. Grit isn't just about enduring, it's about embracing a challenge and knowing that the work you put in, no matter how tough, will pay off in the end. It's about knowing the right time to ask for help and be responsible with your health when necessary. It's about being there for your team and your family when they ask for help. But also, it's about knowing when what they really need is a walk or a good night's sleep. I'm MCNEW, and this is Duty, Grit, and Grinds. Thanks for watching.